All right. Well, we know it's a busy night, that time of night, especially we're a small crowd but mighty crowd right now. I imagine we'll have a few more friends join us too. But we are recording for those who can't be with us today. Uh, Good to see everyone tonight. I'm Maureen Israel, Superintendent with BCS, and I'm joined by Alan Simpson, our Director of Communications and Outreach as well on the side, which is a lot of what we'll be talking to you all about today is some of the efforts that we have in place and that we need your support with as well as input on as we really start thinking ahead already into the next 22-23 school year and enrollment for our students. So we'll talk a bit about some of the changes that you've heard us share, give a little bit of context, and then of course leave time for you to ask questions as well. So we expect to run just till about 6:30 tonight, a bit shorter than potentially other town halls, really zoning in on some of these ideas. So we'll start a little high level. We're not going to spend a lot of time there, but we will just talk a bit more about what this means as we start prepping for these terms like open enrollment, this idea of what it means to have a lottery. We'll start talking a bit in that regard and then move that into thinking about these enrollment preferences. You saw an email from our board chair last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago. What are weeks, right? Sometime in the recent past about preference changes that we have proposed. We'll talk a bit more about those and what that process looks like and moving forward, hopefully with that with the county. And then we'll talk about the connection along with outreach efforts that we have in place, things that we may need your support with along the way as well to make sure that we are really doing the best we can to ensure all families have the accurate understanding of who BCS is in the community and that they get the informed opportunity to make the right choice for their family as they think about BCS as a potential option and choice down the road. So that's sort of where we'll go over the next about 20 minutes together and then leave some time for questions as well. All right, Ellen, so let's start. Let's go into what does this mean to have a lottery? We hear conversations about it. We know sort of the general idea of how it exists. As a charter school, as a public charter school, it is by law and part of our charter that says that we have to take applicants anywhere, actually in California. Though we do, and you'll hear me talk in a minute about preferences, though we do have a preference for students who live in our area, in our district, technically, any student in California could apply to BCS. There's no fee to apply. There's no take this test to see if you can master the things before you come, right? We know anyone can apply. And part of that lottery says, if more people apply than the number of spots that we're able to offer, we are required to do a public random drawing or a public lottery to fill those spots. So it says you can't, pick the names of people that you know or that you like or people that you've talked with. You can't do it by whoever put an application in first. It has to be a random lottery, a random drawing. So what ends up happening and what many charters do, since many charters do often have wait lists, is that they hold an open enrollment period where they say, okay, between these dates, which we'll designate that have been approved by a board, this is when anyone who applies will just take all those applications. It doesn't matter if you're the first person to apply or the 90th or the 700th, right? Anyone who applies during this period that we've called open enrollment will take your applications. When that period closes, we'll take all those student names by grade level and we'll randomly run a lottery. So we use an outside program. We use a program called SchoolMint that randomizes all those names based on preferences, which I'll show you in a minute. And then that creates the quote order for us in which we would then have spots available for families. And so obviously, as many of you did when you came and had students, you were part of that lottery, you entered and your names came up. And we know there's certain ways that people might have a preference in order to be able to get a spot in that. Those are all written into our charter. Those all have to be approved through our charter. But historically at BCS, we've always had to run that lottery, right? Because we've had openings or not have had more applicants than we have had openings. Typically that's true in kindergarten, right? We always bring more students there. And then as we see openings happen in other grade levels, we run that lottery still so that if an opening comes, we know where to go on that wait list. We'll talk a little bit about what those preferences are now and what those proposed changes are, right? So the current ones in black are the ones that already exist, right? You know that if you have a sibling, your chances of getting in via that lottery are higher, right? If you live within the LASD, the district, right? The boundaries. That's because once a student comes into us, any other students connected to that student rise up on the lottery list. They get that preference. That's been true for us, right? This is also true of BCS staff, children who live within LASD. You see these preferences listed out. The proposal that we've made to the county, and it's one that we've been in conversations with the county now for, gosh, over a year, since before I came to BCS last year, and thinking about how can we ensure that all families know that they're welcome at BCS. How can we make sure that the narrative of the dialogue is not that BCS only selects certain students, or that BCS costs a ton of money to attend like a private school, right? How can we make sure that there's an understanding of anyone in the community that BCS is open and available? One of the ways we can do that is through creating these preferences to offer a preference to those who may not have the same economic levels as others. That's where this free reduced price meal, you might see that written as FRL, FRPM. So anyone who would qualify for free reduced price lunch would receive a preference as well to enter the school. You'll see that second preference is written anyone who's in our local boundary, our local district. We'd hold up to 10% of openings in a class in a grade level for students who qualify in that regard, before going to children of BCS staff, before going to those who live within the district boundaries. So that's when people would enter the lottery, that's how their preferences would fall in line. This is just one of the ways, right, that we know we have to open that dialogue. But you'll hear me talk a little bit more about this as well. It's often very true, and this is where your help comes in place, of charters, that there's just a lot of misinformation still and misunderstanding of what charters are. You probably have heard this if you've talked with friends or family members. When you say, oh yeah, my student goes to a charter school, they might say, oh, that means you pay for it, or oh, do they have to take a test, or oh, not everybody can go there, right? Like there's a lot of myths that still continue to exist about charters. Part of that is us continuing to make sure we're breaking that narrative and that cycle and that dialogue. And a big part of that for our focus this year is really making sure that all families realize that they're welcome and they can attend and be part of BCS. It's not just for a limited number of families. Mm-hmm. This is why these preferences are those that we'd like to propose and that we are proposing to the county to make an adjustment on before our enrollment period opens this fall. Typically, our enrollment period opens in November. So we will be talking a little bit more about what that process looks like to go in front of the county and share this with them in the coming weeks.
And one thing I'd add, Maureen, just quickly to underline that, just so you all appreciate, even the language of the enrollment and the admission process sounds, to some people who aren't familiar, it sounds private-y. It sounds like a private school. We can't do much about that except communicate as clearly, as Maureen said, as clearly as we can, that we welcome all families. And I'm going to talk a lot in the next stage about how you can help with that. But some of this language works against our interests here, and there are no other magic words we can use. This is an enrollment process, and there is an admission process, but it is a public school.
Go ahead, Alan, and start sharing some of those other ways that we are looking to continue to do outreach. Yeah,
I mean, the county has asked about these preference changes, but we've been working with county staff for quite a while. And some of you have been helping with different ways we can make sure all families know that BCS welcomes all families. And really, this is something I mentioned to Maureen, and this is something that as a communications person, I've said this to clients in the past, to companies I've worked with. One of the first rules of communications to me is that no one has actually heard of your organization. I've said that to Fortune 500 companies. I've said that to national associations. It's hard for us to recognize that, but it's important for us to recognize that the biggest audience of families who are coming into the open enrollment process are families with pre-K age kids. If you already have kids in the K-8 space, you know more about the schools in Los Altos and likely including Bullis Charter School. But one thing we need to remember is that many families, especially with younger kids, haven't yet heard of Bullis, and so haven't heard any information about how we welcome them, and maybe have only heard bad things about us. But more importantly, these are some of the steps, some of which we've been doing for a couple of years now, and some of the things we're expanding. As most of you know, we relaunched the Bullis Summer Camp this summer, including doing a partnership in San Jose, but more importantly here at our campus, adding room for kindergarten and first grade students, which hopefully helps us reach and connect with some of those families with younger children. We have 2 people part-time working with me on our outreach team, and they're going to be focused especially on reaching the underserved families and the neighborhoods that we want to make sure really see a lot of information about BCS and about this process. And we're doing a lot. Obviously, one of the places, the old joke about why do you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is. Where do you find the kids who are going to be going into kindergarten next year? Well, you go to preschools and you go to childcare centers, but you also reach out to all the community programs, especially in the neighborhood, the San Antonio neighborhood north of El Camino Real, which is where we may find more families who are eligible for the free and reduced price meal program, but some of the other underserved audiences that we want to make sure know about BCS. So one thing we're always clear about for our open enrollment, we will be sending materials to every household in Los Altos. We want everyone to know about BCS. We're also going to be doubling down and a lot of things that we wanted to do last year, but because of COVID, we couldn't, to make sure families in the neighborhoods that we really want to reach, especially, are getting a lot of visibility and a lot of contact from our staff. And we'll talk more about how families can help with that as well. We're also making some changes to our website just to reiterate some of this language. Some of it's really simple changes, making sure a message about welcoming all families is front and center on our website, making sure that we're being very clear that we are not only a public school, but a free public school. That sounds redundant to some of us, but if you're just learning about Bullis, it's something you may really need to hear, especially if all you've heard is, well, it's different. So maybe it's private, maybe it's more complicated. We want you to know that it's free, it's a public school, it's a charter school, and you're welcome here. And another thing, obviously, is making a lot of the materials even more accessible. That means making them in multiple languages, but it also means one of the things that we learned with Bullis Summer Camp that we should know, but it helps to learn again and again, is it's easier to reach a lot of families by text than it is by email. And so while we'll have a lot of email marketing, we'll also be communicating with families that we can, including some of the families who came to our summer camp, through text with just a link to, here's our more information about enrollment. Here's more information about our parent information nights. Here's the application itself. The application for our enrollment is a pretty simple 1.5 page document. How do we use that in English, in Spanish, in Chinese, and make sure more families just see that and see that this application process is nothing to be scared about. It's just, we need your name and some information about your kid, and then we'll tell you more about when the lottery is coming up. And another big part of it is how you all can help. I've said this to probably many of you who are on the Zoom now. I don't think there's a better way to tell the story of Bullis than through Bullis families, through some of the kids who've already graduated, the alumni of Bullis, who can talk about their experience, who can talk about how great it was for your children, who can talk about how you maybe you came from another school, maybe you moved from another neighborhood, but the things that really worked here for you, because those are the stories that really resonate for other parents who are trying to find a great place for their kids. So the testimonials, the individual contacts that you all can make, and here are just a few examples of some of the ways that you can do that. We talked about email and text, but a lot of you were in childcare, had your kids in childcare or preschool programs before you came to Bullis. You can help us reach out to those programs. You can connect through the chats and the online spaces that are parent only, so I stay out of them. And this is just one of the examples of, we're going to have yard signs and flyers and other materials available. So we're going to ask later if you'd be interested in getting some of those yard signs before I start printing them, because that's one of the ways that just even a simple message like this example on the screen is just a brand reminder for a lot of families that might say, oh, I'm not even sure I know that much about Bullis. There's a website, I'll go look and find out more about it. So these are just a few of the ways that we're going to try and help families engage and kind of be our ambassadors to a lot of other families. As I said before, we have some staff who will be doing a lot of knocking on doors, a lot of meeting with preschool leaders, but the way that any ways that you can support that is going to be a big help as well. So this is the example of just I want to share this in the chat, or Maureen, if you can add that. This is just a simple Google form that you can fill out to tell me if you are able to put up a yard sign. There's a question in there. We have the yard signs will be, 2 feet by 1.5 foot. They can fit in a window. You could post them in your front yard. I'm especially interested in if you can tell me in the comments on this form, if you have a high visibility place, even better. But we also have a couple of banners that we've already printed that I think are 4 feet by 4 feet. So if you have a fence, we used to hang banners in some other spots in Los Altos, but the city's limited any banners like that. So we'll have banners up that you've seen before at North and South Campus. But if you have a fence that's visible to a high traffic area, we can get we can get one of those banners to you for that as well. And the last part I really want to focus on is some messages that I hope you've already heard me say. We've included all 3 of these messages in the material we've been sharing with the county for months. And to me, these are just kind of the fundamental themes. And if you were asking me, Alan, I've got some friends or some neighbors, I can tell them about Bullis. What should I say? This is where we start, I think. I think the first message is our headline. It's a way not only of rebutting some of the bad information out there, but also just really testifying to the truth about Bullis. We welcome all families. We want all students to look at Bullis. The second one, as I've said several times, this is a public school. It's free. We're open to all students. We want you to consider it. And I think the last one is especially important because, again, you know this as parents, this isn't about all children. This is about your own child. And every parent wants to be reassured some great things about why this school will be great for their child. And I think one of the biggest ways we tell that story is the individualized learning experiences, the focused learning goals, the stories that you can tell better than I can about why this really will be a great fit for your child. Those are the things that I think parents really want to know about. And again, this is my job, and I will be doing a lot of this outreach. The staff I've got working with me will be doing a lot of this outreach. But the more you can help with it, let's be honest, you're better messengers about this than I am, because nobody is a better ambassador about a school than the current parents and students who've graduated from a school. So getting Bullis parents and Bullis alumni out there sharing your stories is going to be extremely helpful.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that too real fast, Ellen, because I think this is where like every conversation you all have, whether it's, I mean, I know it's hard these days, right? But in the grocery store, when you like run into somebody at soccer practice, another parent, and they're like every opportunity you have to break that narrative that exists is really important, right? Oh yeah, my student does go to Bullis. Yeah, oh yeah, it's a public school. Yep, it's public, right? Any of those little pieces that come through. Oh yeah, we serve special education students. We serve students who speak English as a second language, right? Like these are all important things that it's easy for the narrative to get twisted, and unfortunately is often the case. As of narratives getting twisted. That was true of my time in Texas with charters. That's true of California. This is not just Bullis, this is charters in general. Charters are competition, right, to local district, right? There's a way to look at that as it's an opportunity to raise the standards for everybody and to provide choice. And that's what I believe deeply about charters, that charters are provide choice for families. I think that's really important. When we think about that idea of having individualized learning, individualized focus, you as a family should have the chance to choose what's the best environment for your student. And that's why I believe in charters, because it provides you with that choice, right? And so continuing to provide that message of choice, of opportunity for all is something that's really important for us to make sure that we can continue to break that narrative that's so easily formed up over time, not only against Bullis, but against all charters. So with that, let me share a little bit about sort of what our next steps are, and then I see some great questions already coming through that we can tackle as well. As many of you know, and we shared at the end of last year, all of California charter schools received a 2-year extension on their renewal, right? As part of a charter school, we are required to come up to our authorizer, who is the county, every 5 years for renewal. That has now been extended for 2 years. During that time, right, that gives us time to make sure that we are continuing to push and do a lot of the outreach that we know is going to be really important to be able to show the county, yes, we hear you, yes, we're working in partnership with you, and here are ways that we know we're already continuing to make adjustments and to impact and make sure all families know we're open to serving them. So that's our aim over these next few years. You heard Alan mention it as well, though, that needs to start now, right? We can't wait until 2 years from now to say, great, let's see what are some things we can do. We know it's important to begin that process now, but fundamentally as an educator, it's also deeply important for me to serve all students. I am in this work and I believe deeply in this work. And I know I speak for Alan too, in his movement in his part of being in this education space, is that we believe all students deserve the best possible opportunity full stop, end of sentence, right? That is my job, is to make sure that I'm creating an environment where that's true, where there aren't constraints put on families or students to that they have to qualify to be their best selves. It is our job to give them the best possible, be their best possible selves and provide a space for them. So like there's an inherent part of my work as an educator that this is just what we do, right? Is we make sure that we serve all families. Knowing that, where you can be supportive, right, is that we are constantly in communication and working with the county. As I shared earlier, we will come up to the county next week at their meeting to present these enrollment preferences to them for their approval. And they'll do a vote up or vote down for us at that time, which will then either allow us the opportunity to move forward this open enrollment cycle or not, right? We'll see how that plays out next week. But aside from just that county meeting, we know, I see some of the folk on this call, as well as others, family members, have already been great support in really helping break that narrative, coming forward in county meetings, board meetings to say, hey, actually, I want to share something great that's going on at Bullis. And this has been a conversation a lot of charters have had together, is just recognizing the world in which we are operating as charters. There's a lot of negativity against us. How can we help break that cycle and share those great stories and great things that are happening? And so if there is something great that you have to share that you would be willing to share as a parent, please reach out to Alan, let him know. Alan maybe can drop his email address in the chat as well for those who don't have it. We'd love to have you be part of that voice with us, whether that's at a board meeting, if you're feeling confident and ready to roll and want to share something, Alan can help set you up for that. Whether it's meeting with a trustee, we have groups of parents already who have done some great work in connecting with trustees to help share some of those great things and break that narrative. That's fantastic. And we also have connections with other charters where we know we want to help build bridges, help support other charters through this process, have them support us as well. So if you are open to engaging in that dialogue, you have a great story you want to share, or you'd like to be part of that process, please let Alan know, and we can help slot you in one of what might be the right fit for you to help carry this narrative along. With that, let's take some questions. If you do have questions, this is like very high level, right? We could talk very nitty gritty about any of these pieces, but if you do have questions, definitely jump in. I do want to name, I see lots of great faces and names on here, and there's some of you who are bear guides, which is phenomenal and such a great part of our community and connecting with others. And that's a great avenue too, is you are connecting with your families who may be new to us through that lens, getting them, like asking them what questions they have, what wonderings they had as they went through the application process, how they learned about Bullis, right? All these things are really helpful for us too, to gather info on as we continue and find ways to make sure that we're reaching all those families.
And then one quick, I'd add to that, since you mentioned bear
Please.
guides, and again, like Maureen, I greatly appreciate that, because one of the things we talk with the county, in any broad sense with the school, recruitment and retention are part of this process. And that's why bear guides are, welcoming continues when the kids and the families come to the door after enrollment. And that's why bear guides work is so important. But you're also in a great position to connect with some of those younger families whose oldest kids are kindergartners or first graders now, and who may also know more other families with slightly younger kids who might be the enrollment audience we're looking for starting this fall. So reaching out to them, sharing these materials with them is another way we can get even more people involved.
Yep, awesome. Some great questions. I want to address these, and then if others want to drop your questions in, feel free to. Great question about retention. What about students who might be from underserved populations? How can they keep up with what other parents offer? How can they keep up with things like tutoring or individual support? That's a heavy question. I will say this. I served as a principal for a number of years, almost a decade, in an underserved community. And I will speak about our staff, and I'll speak about the staff there, right? Like, a school is a space to provide those things. It's fantastic that there are opportunities that many families in our community are able to provide outside of school for things like tutoring, but that's very feasible and possible to do inside school as well, right? Those are part of the way that our programs are structured. When we think about being and really focusing on individualized learning, when we think about focused learning goals, right? Many of you have conferences coming up in this next week. When we think about bringing students in and supporting the whole child, meeting the whole child, we have many layered systems in place in school structures already to help with those pieces, right? So I would say, like, many of those exist. They may not be as tapped as they could be. And there may be areas that we need to build up more, right? If we realize, wow, there is a need for us to provide more internal support, or we need to look at something like an office hour structure and make adjustments for students who need something additional. I think those are really important conversations for us to be having over the next few years. I do think we're going to have to watch closely, but I feel really confident in both having served in a community like that and seeing some of those challenges, but also, as you all know, in our staff is phenomenal and they're great problem solvers. And I think our ability to assess, to use data to understand what students are coming into us, what needs they might have, and problem solving around ways we can support them, I feel really confident in our staff's ability to do that. I do have another great question here too about aftercare. Aftercare has always been a challenge. What about funding? What about space? Is there any conversation about changing this to a full day K? Love this question. I think I see some folk on here who actually have been in conversations with me about many of these things. So I will say this. Yeah, I think there's a lot of angles here and a lot to unpack. This is a much bigger conversation. We know that there are space limitations with our facilities agreement. And we also know that there are needs that families have. Both maybe those who have, maybe we talked that lens of underserved populations, but also families who have parents who work multiple, who both are working, right? And have to figure out schedules. There's a variety of different needs, and we know there's some challenges that Half Day K presents. We have a great parent group right now working on some potential solutions, and I think there's probably a short-term way for us to look at solutions and then a long-term conversation around kindergarten. I think that's a really important one for us to have as a school and community, recognizing just also the lay of the land. So there's a bit of a balance there, right? And knowing that we do have limitations in what we're able to offer currently with facilities, but I think it's an important conversation for us to engage in, to think about the next year, 2, 3 years down the road and what possibilities might exist. So yeah, it definitely has been, there have been conversations around that. The BBC has done a phenomenal job already starting to think about this idea of aftercare. And I really appreciate their support and already wanting to engage in that conversation and thinking about what that could look like in the short term. I appreciate this question, so I'm gonna share it here too. Okay, this question essentially says, Maureen, but are we really free? Like, are we really free? We have a foundation and we do ask for donations. That is true, right? There is a reality to that. There is a reality that then we could go down a whole other town hall around that, about how there is just a gap in funding and how we exist, and that is where our foundation is phenomenal in being supportive and helping us fill that gap so that we can continue to offer. Many of you are a big part of that. That's huge. We also know that there are families who aren't able to contribute. And that's important for us to make sure they realize that they can still be part of our family, even if they can't contribute at the same levels of others. That's part of our messaging that we need to make sure that we are supporting. We also know and have talked extensively with our foundation. They're incredible supporters of our thoughts to make this adjustment, and they already have some great ideas of how we can make sure that we are supporting all those families. But there's a tension there, right? Which I recognize and understand. We do need to make sure that if it is truly something that families can afford, that we are acknowledging that and ensuring that they still realize they can be part of our school. I don't know, Alan, if you'd add anything there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question. And you know, the tension, just from a communications perspective, I think one of the ways that we've expressed it in the past is tuition free, to try and provide a little more clarity there.
Mm-hmm.
But we actually heard back from our colleagues at the county, the county staff, saying that they felt sends the wrong message. That even the message of tuition free sends to a new audience, a new family, a message of, well, not really free and you shouldn't consider it. So they are encouraging us, and I think Maureen and I agree. I think I respect the question. We do need to provide additional clarity, but the headline really should be, we're a free public charter school, because that's how we make more families think this is something I should explore. We don't want the cautionary message to be a discouraging message, but we also do want to be very clear, and Maureen said this, that all the asks you may get from the foundation or from others those are voluntary. And that's an important message to convey as well.
One last good question here around diversity. Like asking, I see our population, I see our students, they seem pretty diverse. What we're talking about when we look at the enrollment preferences is economic diversity, right? There's different ways to look at what diversity is. And that enrollment preference is one that aims to target economic diversity. Other conversations, right? You could look at things, and there's other areas that we've had conversations with the county on. What about our supporting and serving special education students? Are we making sure that we acknowledge that, and that is something that is shared out there with our community? What about serving our English language learners, right? So part of it is this messaging. We do support students who are English language learners. We do support special education students. Do other families know? Is that the dialogue, or is the dialogue different? And how are we making sure that we are adjusting that narrative? So specifically, the preferences is around economic diversity, but when we think about diversification of abilities, right, we think about diversification of language, not just the ethnic or race diversity as well. There's lots of ways to look at that we want to make sure that we are tackling. Awesome. Those are really, really thoughtful questions, and really challenging ones, and ones that I think are really important as we continue to push this, right? And as we continue to think about what's possible, and how we, and you've heard me say this a lot, but it's real, how we change the narrative. A big part of this, right, is making sure that that we have that branding and that narrative that is about welcoming all, and this is about serving all students. That's at the core of the work that we do. That's what I believe so deeply in. That's what gets me up every day. That is what my purpose and passion is helping support and serving students. And we need to make sure that continues to be the message that families hear from us at BCS. So all these questions help push us to make sure that we are targeting our dialogue in the right way, that we're asking the right questions, that we're seeking and engaging in the right conversations. So I'm really grateful that you are pushing in those ways. And I'm sure more questions will come up as we go through these next few weeks, as we learn more from the county, as we see what next steps take, as we find some areas that really work for us, as we encounter some challenges. Please continue to reach out and ask those questions to us, or offer those ideas. If you see something really great that could be an avenue for us, whether that's a contact, an area that we can, families we can talk with, whatever that might look like. Alan's email is in the chat. We definitely invite you and welcome you to reach out to him, so that we can continue to engage our community in this process, right? Because I think that's what's most important about when we think about this message, is that we are a full community. We get this opportunity to connect with each other, with our families, with our staff, with our students. We get to build this family together over the course of time, and that's something that's really powerful. And it's something that I'd love as many families as possible to be a part of. So we appreciate your help so much in that process, as we continue to create and build BCS to become even greater. The fact that we're talking about 22-23 school year is wild. We've barely kicked off the school year, but here we are, right? That's part of the process. So I'm grateful for you all for diving in, and we'll definitely keep you all updated via Bare Essentials, as well as probably later in the year, a more thorough update once we get into open enrollment period, once we learn more about what might be possible for things next school year, to give you an update on where things stand, and to get some more input as well. For now, I know it's like smack in the middle of dinner time for people, and getting night routines begun. So thank you all for taking some time to join us. It's really, it's great to have familiar names and faces here who I know are so committed to our school. It's really powerful. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. We'll talk with you soon.